So everybody, welcome to the Nature Journal Club. Wow, could you grab that for me? I'm John Muir Laws, and I'm here today to try to give you my last tips on drawing mammals. I've just finished a 3-session, this is the last of a 3-session series on drawing mammals. And today is all the rest of the stuff that didn't fit into the previous 2. So the first one was on mammal anatomy. The basics of how the bones are connected together, the major muscle masses on those, and the differences between some of the most prominent animal groups. Last month we had a workshop on drawing heads from the front and the side and a 3/4 view. In this workshop I'm going to do everything that I couldn't really reasonably fit into those other workshops, so it's going to be a grab bag. I'm going to start off with taking a look at putting the whole animal itself in the 3/4 view position. If you remember from looking at the heads, there's some very counterintuitive things that happened when we took the head. You could look at it from the side, kind of get it from the front, but when you turned it at that 3/4 view angle, so you see part of the side, part of the front, there are very surprising things like how the eyes were changing shape that happened in those heads. And if you're expecting to see those things, you could catch them and it's easier to get them into your drawing. The same thing is true with drawing the whole mammal. If you just practice or study things from the side, then you're going to find yourself waiting for the animal to turn to side view. Right? But there are a number of strategies you're going to find really help you get this thing on paper in this 3/4 view. So I find it's a very useful thing to look at. We're also going to look at, we studied the architecture of large quadrupeds, you know, the sort of like a horse, an elephant, a deer, a lion. The things you're more likely to encounter out there are rodents, squirrels, and small mammals. Their spines are much more bendy and flexible, and this puts some really interesting angles into their body shape. We'll take a look at what happens with that and how help you kind of get that on paper, because if your model for drawing mammals is based on a horse, the squirrel is going to give you some trouble. We're also going to look at how to get some fur texture. Fur texture without drawing all the hair. The secret, here's the spoiler alert, the secret is you don't draw all the hair. You suggest that there's hair there, and then the person who's looking at it, they're going to look at the drawing and go, oh yeah, this is hairy. So how do you make something look hairy without drawing all the hair? And the last thing which we're going to do is take a look at animal gaits. And this is, so not the things that keep an animal in a pack. Right? This is the way that they move, the way they move their legs as they're walking or running around. And if you've ever ridden a horse and it's walking, and then all of a sudden you started trotting, you realize that there's something really different that has gone on there. And so we're going to take a look at what is a practical way of handling animal gaits. And what can you actually see, and what are you going to do about that? All right? So we're going to start with the 3/4 view. So that is taking a look at an animal not straight from the side, but from, you're seeing part of the side in either part of the back, the rump end, or part of the chest. So a little bit, the body is turned at an angle. There. When we do that, we're going to, something that's going to be very useful is simplifying how we think about the structure of this mammal, particularly its trunk, and we're also going to look at the legs. So we're going to notice a couple of things about this beastie here. The first is that in the trunk here, I can divide that into 3 major zones. There's this part up here, well, we're going to start on the back here, all right? There's the mass of muscles around the hips and the thigh that makes one prominent bump on the side of the critter. The next section is the abdomen here, the trunk of our mammal, and this is where all our intestines are in the rib cage. And the last part is here. This is these are the shoulders and the armature for the forelimbs. Note that the forelimbs come down straight. The back limbs have a big bend in them. So the back limbs are bent, the forelimbs come down straight. We go into a lot more detail about this in the first of those 3 mammal lectures and what's going on here. For now, we're going to notice, just make a note of that. And for extra points, can anybody tell me what joint this one is?
Make a guess. Ankle.
That's the ankle. Very good. Very good. So this is the heel or the ankle joint. So this is our ankle here. Its hip is actually up here. Its knee is here, going down to its ankle here. This whole part here is its foot. So these are the metatarsal bones, and then it has its phalanges or finger or toe bones sticking out into the grass there. So heels off the ground, the back leg bent, and we have sections 1, 2, and 3 here. Let's take a look at a skeleton. All right, this is a skeleton of a cheetah. And what we're going to do is think about those 3 sections on this skeleton, and then we're going to spin it a couple of different directions. So in side view, what I think about is here is section 1. Here are section 3, the hips back here, and section 2. So 1, 2, 3. Bless you.
Thank you.
All right. Notice again that bent back leg. That is the ankle sticking up there. Little head up here. So we've got section 1, 2, 3, and a bent back leg. If I rotate this thing so that it is facing towards me, all right, so the cheetah's walking towards the viewer, those sections 1, 2, 3 are going to stack up on each other. And you're going to see more of section number 1. All right, so here's section number 1. Section number 2 wraps behind that. And section number 3 is back there. So here is 1, 2, 3. If I spin this around so that I'm looking at the back side, it's 3, 2, 1. So now I see all of 3, and 2 tucks into that, and 1 wraps around the front of that. And note this bend in the back leg. So, let's take a look at a photograph again. I don't know if the people on watching the video can see this, but on this photograph here, can you see sections 1, 2, and 3?
I don't think I can see much of 2.
Barely.
Barely. So we have 1, we have 2, and then there's 3. They're all up, up, up. So you see this going away from you. Notice that heel, the heels are actually pointing towards each other a little bit. All right? If you stand up, so people watching on the video, you're not going to be able to see my feet. But what I want you to do is to stand up where you are right now, go up on your tippy toes, and notice that if you hold your heels straight back, you feel a little bit off balance if your heels are going straight back. But if your heels are rocked in a little bit, pointing towards each other, you feel a little bit more balanced. When we actually go up on our tippy toes, we have actually a little bit better balance if our feet are pointed out a little bit. So, and you look at this critter here, its heels are pointing in towards each other. See it really, really well on this one right here. Right? And this might seem like this weird kind of esoteric point, but hang on. Because of this is sort of the natural way. They can hold their foot out at a different position, but they will tend to, when they're in sort of a regular relaxed position, these quadrupeds, the heels will tend to be slightly in towards each other instead of straight forward. So what, obviously if you're looking at something from the back, then you're going to be drawing those heels pointed towards each other. But this ends up being really an important point for drawing critters in the 3/4 view position. And the reason is that I'm going to, here's my elbows pointing in. Those are now my heels, right? My heels are pointing towards me. If you're looking straight on, you're seeing those heels, those heels pointing in towards each other. But if the animal's at a slight angle, this leg is now pointing towards you. And you're looking now at this leg straight on. You're looking at the side of this leg here. And similarly, if it turns this way, now this leg is pointed towards you. And you're looking at this inside of the side of this. So what we tend to want to do is to draw both of those back legs in the same position because we know this is a bilaterally symmetrical animal. And if you're copying something from a photograph, people will get this detail right, but when they're drawing things in the field, our brain takes over and the thing's kind of moving around a little bit, and you go like, oh, what I must have seen is these two legs parallel with each other in the same position. So what people will do is draw, here's just sort of imagine that, here is my deer, here's the front, right? What people will think the way it should be is that these back legs should be parallel to each other, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's because of this little in effect, check this out. Once this is on your radar, you're going to see it everywhere. Whoa. Isn't that cool? So here, we're looking at this thing from the back, right? So this leg is pointing directly away from you, and this one you're seeing inside view. Isn't that fun?
That's very cool.
It's really, really cool. So you're going to see this from the front and from the back. We'll see a few more examples
It
of
looks
this.
so right. I mean, as soon as you draw it, it looks so right.
Isn't that neat?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was a big aha moment for me. I went through a bunch of my old sketchbooks, and I have tons of sketches with the legs in the same position, in a 3/4 view position, right? But once this dawned on me, all of a sudden I'm seeing this everywhere, right? So that's kind of a fun little thing. If you are looking at the front of a critter, we'll kind of see what its legs do in a moment, but there are a few little details of this body that we're going to want to pay attention to. So let's take a look. Here's section 1. Actually, take a look at this before I draw on it. Can you see section 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Right? This is a very useful construct. Oh, by the way, 1, 2, and 3? Or 3, 2, and 1? 3, 2, and 1. Alright, so we have 1, 2, 3. And here the center line of this chest is coming in here. So the neck is coming down into, the neck of this pronghorn is inserting into an oval at that angle. So there's the neck coming down into that shape. I find thinking of what is the center line for this animal's chest is very, very a useful kind of reference point. And that's going to go right through where the base of the neck is going to come in. There's a little bit of space between the two front legs. And down here are the pectoral muscles of the pronghorn. So you actually get this two-pack here. So here's one little unit, two little unit. It has this, not the six-pack, here's the two-pack. Those are the pectoral muscles right there in the front of the critter. And the leg is going to attach on either side of those. So when I'm looking at the front of a critter, I'm going to expect to see this little collar where the neck is inserting down, and then there'll be a little bit of space there between those legs. And sometimes actually this section even puffs out, kind of sticks out a little bit. But so here is my sort of pectoral muscle zone. Those are a couple of things that I want to kind of keep track of for the front of my critter. So you don't have to be afraid of these front three-quarter views. You see the same thing going on here? In your head, trace kind of the oval of where that neck is inserting. And notice a little bit of space between those front legs. And if you look very carefully, there's a little, you can see the little two-pack. Two-pack. Can you see sections 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Can you see sections 1, 2, and 3? Look at the insertion of that neck in an oval here, pointed down here to the center line on either side of those pectoral muscles. So just spending a little time noticing the structure in this area is going to make it much easier for you in your sketches to be willing to draw the critter from this angle. Otherwise we tend to just put everything in side view. So don't be afraid of the front. Notice front legs straight, back legs bent, and look at those leg positions. Ooh, isn't that cool? So here we have it from the front. This leg is pointing straight towards you. This one you're seeing inside. That's because those two heels are pointed in towards each other. From the front, you see the mass of the muscles of the leg very clearly. Beefy up here, mid-size here, and skinny down here. The mammal is taking all the muscle mass and bringing it closer to the core. The more that you can have things operated distally from the body, operated by little thin tendons pulled by muscles back in here, the easier it is going to be to move this limb around. If you have something heavy out here like muscles, then it's going to be difficult to move that. So expect to see these things getting smaller. And also notice that where those bones come together, there's a wider spot in here where the joints are. So often when I'm drawing a leg, I'll kind of put in a ball at these little points here. It kind of just helps me get, look at those little balls, right? Sort of the knobbiness where those bones come together. And this is true, you're going to see this effect, you're looking full on the side of the leg in this front three-quarter view. Looking from the back, looking from the front. The only difference here is that, just matched, that on the one that's facing towards you, the leg that is on the side of the body that is closer to you, that's the one that you're going to be seeing from the front view. And when it's turned away from you, it's the reverse of that. So the one where you're seeing that skinny view of the leg, that's the leg that's on the far side. Can you see sections 1, 2, and 3?
Yes.
Notice the positions of these legs. What I should mention here, it bears mentioning, you can actually see it very well on this photograph right here, that this little outward, there's a slight outward turn in the front legs as well. But it's not really a big deal because the leg is being held straight. So if there's a bend in something and you turn it from different angles, you see that shape change. If it's straight and you turn it from different angles, there's not much of a change. It does turn out that the deer's leg is a little bit, it's wider front to back than side to side. So this one that you're seeing the front view of is skinnier. This one you're seeing the side view of is a little bit broader. But that's really subtle. If you don't get that in your picture, not that big a deal, but this back leg, so what I'd like to do now is to walk you through how I might approach drawing a critter like this. What would be my first lines? How do I get this down onto paper? And I'm going to essentially try to kind of follow along with part of it. And I'm going to try to drop into this a few big ideas of things that you might want to look at. And note as I go through this, if there are any strategies in getting this mammal onto paper that are different than what you normally do. And then what I would encourage you to do is just to play with those ideas. And if you like them, to adopt them. If that just doesn't feel like your drawing style, that's totally fine. But see if there's some new ideas in this. So the first thing that I do, you walk out there like, oh my gosh, it's a topee out there on a termite mound. And yeah, topies seem to grow from the tops of termite mounds. It's just the topee thing. And the, or maybe it's their topiary. But the first thing you do is you look at it. I want you to look really hard at it. And here's the hard thing. If you say, okay, I'm going to look really hard at it, what you start doing is just kind of going, and you stare at it. But our brain, when you stare at something, your brain very quickly gets into this little rumination loop where you kind of notice a couple of things, then you're going to notice those again. You keep staring at it, you get the feeling that you're really looking at it, but your brain isn't really taking in all that much information. The animal then goes away and you're like, what was I looking at? Your brain goes, I don't know, I've already forgotten. So if you ever stared at something and then realized my brain's really not hooking that much information. So how can you actively look hard at something? What I'm going to suggest are two different things. And the first is, whatever I see, whatever I notice about it, I'm going to verbalize that. So as I'm looking at something, I don't just look with my eyes, but I look with my mouth. So if I say, all right, so it's body depth, it's above the ground, it's more than one body down from that, so it's a body length and a little bit more. So I'm saying what I'm seeing, and then the animal goes away, and that helps me remember it. So part of looking hard is verbalizing what you see. It's called the production effect, and it's a very powerful memory cue. You can use that for all sorts of things. The things you want to remember. If you walk into your house, you put your keys down in a novel place, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to forget that. Yes, you will, right? But if you say, I'm putting my keys on the counter, right? Then you're later on, you go like, yeah, my keys are on the counter. Just because you said it. So we're going to do production effect with this. Just you see it, you say it, you see it, you say it. The next thing that I do is I start to air draw on this thing. So I want to kinesthetically kind of make a relationship between what I'm seeing in my hand. So I get my pencil out and I'm looking at this thing and my pencil is going like, yeah, your kind of back is that angle and here's the mass of your body and your legs are down here and your body's over here. So I got one eye closed and I'm air drawing on this thing. How would that look? And I'm kinesthetically getting a relationship between these angles that I'm seeing as if I'm tracing on a piece of glass right in front of me. And if I'm saying things out loud, like, wow, really steep angle up here in the chest, that's extremely useful. A few things that you can, other things you can do is you can also use your pencil as, you've seen artists doing this thing, right? What they're doing is they're looking at how parts line up and measuring things. So you could put the shadow of your thing here and kind of like, oh, okay, so that big bump is above the legs there and the head sticks out to the side of that. So if this is the line of the back here, here's one that I find really useful. I put my pencil along the line of its back and I look at where the head is relative to that. A big mistake that I have made a million times is I see this critter has a longish neck and I put my head way up here. I put a long Gerenuk neck or giraffe neck on my critter and then kind of make that attached to it. But if you imagine a line going across the back and look at how high the head is above that, you will be surprised, I'm so often surprised, at how much lower that head sits than I think it should. So I'll put my pencil right along there. Another thing that I look at are what are the proportions of this to this. So how wide is it compared? So I'm not just drawing a body oval. This one is much too skinny compared to that. So I want to look at, for this body box in here, what are those proportions? I'll then often think of how far down the ground is. And a couple of negative shapes that are money, absolute gold in putting these critters together, is the line just roughly across the back of this critter. What is that angle of the back, angle of the head? And also this negative shape right here. So negative shapes are the shapes where you're not looking at your critter, you're looking at the space behind your critter. If you can get this negative shape here, it will put your legs in the right places. If instead you draw this leg and then sometime later you draw this leg, you're probably going to end up with this sort of dachshund effect, right? With this long body. And this space between these is as important as the height down this way. So you get that negative shape here. It does so much to place your legs. So those are things that I'm looking at, I'm thinking about, I'm saying these things out loud. Oh yeah, great negative shape behind the head. Here's that angle behind the head. And then I can transfer it to my paper. So I look first. And what I'm going to do now is show you how I would then start to get this on paper. And what you're going to see is I'm going to build this picture up in 3 stages. First, a very loose drawing that is lightly blocking in the locations of things. Very lightly. If you're just using a graphite pencil, this is just with the faintest ghost touch. Then, once I like the proportions that I have, I'll start to draw a little bit more deliberately and heavily on top of that. And then at the end, I do 1/3 pass where I'm really kind of pressing harder, working on my kind of line and getting the exact shape and details. So you'll see that the speed with which I draw changes. It's going to start with a quicker, looser line. And as the drawing goes on, I slow down. You're going to see that the amount of detail changes. At the start, no detail at all. And as the drawing goes on, I'm going to start to develop, that's where I begin to put in detail. And lastly, the amount of pressure that I'm using in my pencil. I start off with these super light ghost lines, and then as the drawing progresses, I'm going to move into my more deliberate final lines. So all 3 of those things will be kind of happening together, instead of I start drawing, here's my eye, and I finish my eye, and kind of work out there. I'm going to start loose, light, fast, and then slowly kind of refine that. High crime area here. So I'm going to experiment with a new technology for sort of showing you how I'm doing this. And if you like the way this works, I'll do more of these in other workshops. So at the end of this, I'll check in with you guys and see if you like that. In the past, I've been doing some sort of step-by-step, so it's like here's my preliminary lines. And then I do this, and then I do this in a few separate slides. But a number of people have been asking me, that was a big jump between there and there. How do you get between there and there? And also I realized that you're not able to see the speed with which I'm drawing in these different sorts of things. So I'm going to try this. So I usually start drawing with a non-photo glue pencil. So this would be my non-photo glue pencil line, getting the angle of the head and the back. Right? And then putting in the mass of the body here. Right? How wide it is. And here is the ground level. Right? So I'm putting this guy, here's my belly level, here's my ground. Now I'm putting in that negative shape. So this is light, this is loose. I'm going to see if we can zoom on this a little bit on the camera. So it starts off, here's the angle of the chest, blocking in where my head is, trying not to get my head too high. You notice that there's no detail here. This is just, here's the chest angle, that nice, and sort of placing those horns. I'm intentionally not putting in any detail. This was drawn on a computer, and the non-photo blue pencil is much lighter, much paler than this, so you really don't see those lines. But I've enhanced it so that it's easier to see what I have been up to. Then a few other kind of initial ghost lines. If I like those proportions, I'll put a line in across where I see the eyes. And what I will also do is box in the head a little bit. In the head drawing workshop, we looked at, especially on that nose, I was putting a lot of angles in, sort of putting a kind of almost a cardboard box sticking out the face of the thing, where we put this box of the nose on. And that helps me think of that rostrum as a three-dimensional structure. I'm dropping in my neck, and then you'll see me put in sections 1, 2, and 3. So on top of that other framework, here comes section 1, and then I'll put in section 2 and 3. Again, this is loose, light, and the advantage of doing it loose and light is that if I don't like the placement of one of these things, it's easy to change at this point. So if I decided, ooh, I want section number 3 actually to be bigger, it's easy to do that because I haven't pressed hard. I just draw another line. I don't even have to get in there and erase. Nobody's going to notice those little lines when you're all done. Then I'm going to give my legs a little bit more definition here. Here's the level at which the ankles and the wrists are. Again, just lines are standing in for entire limbs. And there it is. So that would be my light framework for putting this guy in. Once I like that, I'll put my non-photo blue pencil down, and I can start to work on top of this structure where I've already worked out the proportions, the basic shape, the angle, the negative shape between here. If I'm trying to draw a leg, and in my head I have to keep track of the distance between, there and how far down I'm, if I already know that wrist joint is going to be here, then it's much easier for me to concentrate on my line and details as I'm coming down. Right, so I have a hard time doing two things at the same time. My brain cannot take that cognitive load. So I compartmentalize it into a few discrete steps, and that makes it easier for my brain to handle. Now I'm ready I put down my non-photo blue pencil. Again, non-photo blue pencils, there's a specific one that I recommend. It's the Col-Erase non-photo blue pencil. It puts down this incredible ghost line. Not just any non-photo blue pencil, but that Col-Erase one, that's the one that you want to get. But you don't want to get trapped in just, then going on to the next step number 2. What some people do is they'll kind of get in there with their non-photo blue pencil and they'll sketch this in, and they become petrified of then taking the next step to a little bit more commitment. The more you commit to this, there are things that you can't go back on, but the whole process becomes even more fun. So don't get locked into playing with that non-photo blue pencil too much. It's just to rough block in. And then once you've got that, you can come along and start to draw on top of that. It's already solved a bunch of your problems for you. And now I often will start anywhere that I want on that. And I can begin to draw in those different parts. So you'll notice that my drawing now has slowed down. It's a little bit darker.
All right. I'll let Kelly.
And I'm working on that chest area, and drop down on those legs. What I'm going to do is actually speed this process up, but I want you just sort of to notice that this part of the drawing is going a little bit more slowly than what was going on before. So I can be a little bit more careful, a little bit more precise. I often will draw little balls in at the joints here. So the leg can come down And then there's a little swelling when you get to that joint. So here's my little ball right there, a little swelling. Negative shapes like this one are very helpful in placing these limbs. But let me just speed this up. You'll see what, if you think you get the basic idea here. Where's my cursor? Ah. So now, so notice that this isn't, final detail, but I can get in there and add in more features. Oh, up here. Right? So here's my basic critter. So this is pass 2. I've roughed in those major forms, went over a little bit more detail, and now the third pass, I'm going to be drawing more slowly, more deliberately, and what you're going to see is your brain will actually ignore a lot of these first lines, and what you'll see is your brain will jump to these heavier lines. You don't even have to erase that initial set. These are lines, there's a little bit more detail. I'm really trying to look at angles as I'm coming down surfaces. How do those angles change? And your eye just snaps to those darker lines. I'm also going to speed up this process so we know we have time for the gates. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. Hey, come back. So, for review, here we go. Alright, so we then draw in more heavily. This is where I'm kind of looking at shapes of muscles. And I'll give you some of that. You can see the 2-pack in front of the chest there. Right. So, there's my basic critter. I got this drawing in 3 passes, slowly moving towards more commitment to my lines. That's my approach to it because, again, my brain, I have a hard time doing it all at once. Experiment with that and see if that approach works for you. The next set of lines that I'm going to show you are not lines that I draw on my paper, but these are going to be lines that I visualize in my head. If I have a line drawing, it's very often my brain is really kind of thinking about the shape of an edge here, but it's not doing so much to think about this thing as a 3-dimensional volume, a real form. If I want this drawing to feel 3-dimensional, I'm doing a very difficult thing. I'm looking out at a 3-dimensional object. Then on my piece of paper, I am putting down, it's a 2-dimensional surface. I'm making 2-dimensional marks to represent, again, this 3-dimensional form. So if I want that to be successful, I want to, when I look at this, not just think of this as the outline of something, but I want to see into it this 3-dimensional form. I want to visualize the depth in it. And sometimes when my brain is too much into thinking of edge, 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 your brain can start thinking of this as kind of this cutout, as this flat shape. So what I'm now going to do, because I want to represent the volume, the form, and the planes on that form, I'm going to try to simplify this into my head to a few simple geometric forms and how those would be put together. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So for the neck, instead of thinking of that as two lines coming down straight, I want to think of that as this curving, this thing with flat sides kind of curving around. See how I'm sort of seeing through the object? I want to visualize that form in my head. I'm visualizing the front of the chest as this box, a little tissue box, with a sort of strange bottom side to it. And we'll get sort of this bent tissue box. Here's the bend of the tissue box. But I'm simplifying what I'm seeing to this three-dimensional block. And depending on what you're drawing, these shapes are going to be different. But it's fun. You can even also try this just with a photograph. Find a photograph of an animal and start drawing over it what you think the tissue box forms would be, to sort of simplify that to a simplified structure. That will help you visualize how you could go about wrapping shadows around it. If the animal stays in front of you, you can just copy the shadows that you see. But if it moves, you're going to have to kind of put that in a different way. In this photograph, the topi has lighting from above. And what I'm going to do is visualize this actually with how would this look if the light were kind of coming from a lower level and kind of from behind it here. And so on my simple tissue box form, I can then think, where would those shadows fall? So that surface would be in shadow. Same with this up here. Where would the shadows be? So you see how the relationship between those, the Kleenex boxes and the shadows. So simplifying that form into major planes is a big deal. I think that there's sort of a huge progression in people's artwork is when they go from thinking about a drawing as edges to they start thinking about it as volumes with planes on them. If you're thinking about whatever you're drawing is the volume and where are those planes and how can I represent that, your animals will take form. The best person that to sort of look for this approach in is the field sketches of William D. Barry. His book, Alaskan Field Sketches. Look for those and just look through those drawings in terms and think of like how is he thinking about the volumes and the forms. And you'll see that he's carving, he's sculpting those animals. And that's why they feel so alive, just in pencil sketches. So if that's what I'm visualizing, then when I grab my pencil, I am putting those shadows in places that are relative to those shapes. You can see how this thinking is very similar to what was going on with my with those sort of simple forms. If you're drawing on toned paper, another really fun thing you can do is then bust out a white colored pencil. And pow, your drawings will really pop. It's fun to do. You start putting that little white pencil on and all of a sudden there's this whole other level of dimension that pops out. Look at how that sort of brings out that form. And it feels like a much more rounded thing.
So your drawing is noon and the photograph is a little earlier or later in the day, right? Different sun angle, still overhead, but just the light.
Yes, yeah. So I'm not copying the shadows from
Yeah,
that.
so you're kind of doing straight noon.
Yeah, or with not straight noon. The light is is sort of down a little bit so that that front plane of the chest would be in shadow.
Okay.
The only hard part about this is it is so much fun to put in the white pencil that I always overdo it. So this is one of these things, it's like salt in soup. A little bit goes a long way. And there's no signal you're going to get that says you should stop now, right? So what happens is you start putting that in and you're gonna overdo it. At least I do, because it's just so much fun. So I should have stopped here, but you notice that there's a little bit more room to go. Notice here it adds to it. But then I had so much fun doing it that I got a little bit carried away, and I kept on going and kept on going and kept on going, and it loses the punch of these. And also, I got so excited about it, you'll see that at the end I added in some really sharp highlights that make it look glossy, like a chrome topy. And that's just sort of like, it's like too much up. See, there it is. There's my chrome topy effect. Right? So it's hard to quit while you're ahead. But here it's interesting to sort of see, there was a line back there where it was better with less. So just imagine that you were looking at these elk and you were drawing this on toned paper. Where would you put your highlights on that elk? Where would you put, and could you get yourself to stop there? Right? You put in that little one there, and some up there, and a little bit there, and a little tiny bit there, maybe.
But tips of every angle, antler.
And then it's like, oh yeah, I can do all those, right? And then oh no, a little bit there, and then a little bit there. No, I want me with it, and then no, right? Oh, right? So it's one of these things, just a little bit, and pow, it's going to work. Let me zoom back out a little. So yeah, it's hard to know when to stop. Look at that back leg. Now you're going to see this everywhere.
Absolutely. That's a
And-
miracle.
Isn't that fun? Why don't we do this? Let's just take 4 minutes, and what I'd like you to do is, actually, but first let me ask, are any of the strategies that I have suggested so far, are there things that you're seeing there that are slightly different than what your usual approach is? What would be some kind of new elements in your game from what you see? So open questions in the room.
Sure, all the volume stuff. I'm not at that point yet.
Okay, so you're thinking about...
Shadows and.
Okay.
Just that 3-part form of the animal, just thinking about those 3 sections, that's new.
Really, that's a very useful thing to have in your pocket.
Yes.
And give me one more.
In one of your other lectures, you started out with a single line that kind of gave you the shape of the way that animal is standing, and that has helped me in drawing my pets.
Yeah.
So I can see where I would put in your 3 shapes, but I like that line. That line has been huge for me.
Yeah. So, for me, when I'm drawing these critters, usually my first go-to thing is just the line of that back.
Mhm.
And then I hang that box from it. Now we're just adding to that. Then you take that box and you turn it into 1, 2, 3. So what I'd like you to do is we're going to take 4 minutes with this critter. And what I'd like you to do is to play with any of these ideas that are kind of new to you in your game, and would get you to sort of look at how you're drawing in a slightly different way, just to experiment with it and play with it. All right? And notice when you're doing a new strategy. And now this one will hold still for 4 minutes for us.
Brilliant.
And you won't have time to finish it, but just get yourself to play with it.
Interesting, you put that line right along the back. It really helps you see where that head is. And one more minute. If you haven't stepped away from the non-photo blue pencil, see if you can get yourself just to start to play with what does it feel like to be in part of the other zone. Did that feel different?
Yes.
So think about what are tools that you can intentionally integrate into your way of drawing. You're going to have homework this week. Your homework, by the way, is you're going to make 7 drawings of mammals in poses that will allow you to play with some of the ideas that you're seeing in this workshop. And these don't have to be a half an hour drawing, an hour drawing. This can be, a 5-10 minute drawing. But 7 different drawings, and people watching on video, this is for you guys too. This content, this information, it's not going to stick in your head unless you actually do something with it. So find some points and just make a little sketch that will challenge you a little bit, so you're just a little bit outside of your comfort zone. Mess with it, play with it, and good things will happen. Right?
Do they all have to be different animals, or do you want?
Okay, it's totally up to you. But speaking of different animals, oh, by the way, look at these wonderful negative shapes. Oh, you've got such nice negative shapes. Little head. Oh, I love those. I like that one. Right. So let's think about some different animals, because all the mammal stuff we've been doing so far, it's like these big quadrupeds, right? The ones you're most likely to see are squirrels. And in this, the kind of the thing's gonna be that their spines are so much more bendy and plastic than these large mammals. And so let's take a look at where the flexion happens in the skeleton. So when the spine is moving around, there are different sections of spine, and in between these sections is where most of the movement happens. So in the cervical spine up here, most of the movement is happening at the front and the back of it. Right? You can have some movement in here, but lots of movement here and lots of movement in here. Actually, the first 2 bones up here, the atlas and the axis. I love the name of the first bone that's holding up your skull. It's the atlas, holding up the world. Right? So the atlas does this, the axis is doing this, And so you've got these two bones that do tons of movement up here. Then you've got the rib cage here. This section through here, there's not a lot of movement through it. It's a little bit more reinforced with all these ribs going around. But at this point here and this point here, there's our big points of a lot of movement in the spine. So with people with spine problems, a lot of people have spine problems right at the point where the spine's coming down and intersecting with the hip bones. That's because that's a big movement part right in there. And at this point here, the pelvis itself is going to be moving at different angles from that little point there. And then you can do whatever you want with your tail. So those are major points of movement along the skeleton. So you don't just think of it as a garden hose that's going to bend. Some places are more bendy than others, right? So bendy point, straight bendy point, big angle point in there too. This is a possum having a little bird snack.
Gross.
Great stuff.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, mad props to whoever
Look at the
assembled
tail.
that. I love that. That's really fun. All right. And here's a bunny. There's a bunny. Movement, movement, straight. Movement, movement. And you know this is kind of confusing. It's like where that doesn't look really bunny-y to me, right? But actually, that's hidden inside a bunch of bunny. Look at that. Isn't that cool?
Absolutely.
Hmm?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes, I've agreed.
Yeah, and actually, this is, yeah, and actually, we're going to get a chance to see a fluoroscope image of a rodent, and you can see this inside something that's moving around. And it's fascinating to get sort of an insider's view of what's happening with there. But notice that, so this section of the body's not going to be moving. Here's some big flex points. And notice that at this point here, oh, there seems to be a change in the angle there. Kitty cat sitting. Big change. Big change here. All right? Couple of dogs. Selective breeding. This guy's going, really? Really? You guys did this to me? But look at that, there's a big inflection point. And notice how the spine comes down and right where the hip bone is, as it's sitting, this hip bone tilts at a different angle. This next slide is a video of a vet making a dog sit. And she's got her hand on the hip of the dog, and as she does, makes the dog sit, you'll see that right at the last moment, the hip swings in. Right? And it makes this bonus angle there in the hip. Right? See there, she's keeping her hand, watch the angle of her hand. See there the hip is up, and then right there's that tuck in.
Yep.
Right? When she gets it to sit back, see it, there it tucks in. Right? And you have the angle, and then it tucks in. See that? She says, I don't want to sit. No, show me the tuck. There's the tuck. Good dog. Right there. See that? Foom, 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 foom. Right? So here we're looking for, as this little rodent is moving around, we're looking for angles in the spine and how those relate to angles that we see on the surface. So where is it straight? Where is it rounded? Rib cage stopping up in there. Rib cage stopping there. Isn't that cool?
Whoa,
So
that's
this next one is my famous, my favorite. This next one is like, don't hate me because I'm beautiful. Here we go. Do it, do it, do it. Here we go.
Whoa.
Oh, there we go.
otter.
No, this is another
Just
little,
a
it's a
bird,
little
yeah.
rat.
Oh,
Isn't that cool?
So the thoracic spine, to have that curve, if we were looking at it from a head-on view, would the thoracic ribs the ribs have to come up like this to keep that shape there, where it's dipped into a valley-like curve for the.
No, I think your ribs are down in here.
But what maintains that gap between the thoracic vertebra and the top? I'm wondering if the ribs curve up. I'll have to look at skeleton pictures. That's really cool.
Isn't that fun?
Or a
Yeah.
fat deposit. I mean.
Yeah, so let's look for skeleton pictures and
Yeah.
try, your mission is, your personal mission
Okay.
is to answer that question and post it on the Nature Journal Club Facebook group.
Oh, I'm not on Facebook. I can send it to you.
Send it to me,
Yeah.
and I will post it credited to you. Right? And so these angles in the hips, boom, 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 they're there. But here's what happens is most of us people look at this and they go, oh, it's round. And so we draw a rounded thing. But if you think of it, that there's a thing in there with inflection points in it, right? And that maybe I could actually represent if I want to catch those inflection points, I then avoid those mistakes of just sort of over-rounding something. So this is true in squirrels, this is rodents, weasels, right? I looked through some of my old weasel drawings, and I've drawn these weasels with rounded hips. Right? And now I look through them again like, oh no, I see those little angles back there. Squirrels too. You see the same thing in bad weasel art. Right? Bad weasel art. I got it further. This just does deserve a moment of reflection. Oops. Sorry, here we go. We gotta go back. Wait, where's there? Here we go. Here's our bad weasel art. So
Bottom one.
yeah, the bottom one. Yeah, the bottom one biting the shoulder there. The subtext there is weasels ripped my flesh. All right. But the whole thing is just so absurd. You also got to just appreciate the contents of this magazine. As a young kid, as a Boy Scout, I subscribed to Boy's Life magazine, and you'd think that Man's Life would be a little bit more mature. Not so.
Send happy vacation is a word running Cape Cod.
Well, the last one is just straight from a men's rights group.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. So, but there it is. Weasels ripped my flesh.
Wow.
Don't make this weasel hip mistake. You take a look at weasels and what's going on with this. Look at those angles, right? So if you round this, you'd miss it, but no, it's angle, 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 right? That curve has inflection points on it because of what's happening with that spine underneath the hood.
Here he is.
Right? So now when we look at this, what I want you to do is to see the angles. The most common mammal that you're going to encounter out there are going to be squirrels. And so we got to give the squirrels some love, some special love to squirrels. So when you see squirrels, don't think, oh, squirrels, they're so common. No. Take advantage of what's common. All right? People will go like, I'm not going to draw that bruised blackbird because they're all over the place. That's exactly why you should be drawing it all the time. All right? So squirrels, when they pop up, we'll take advantage of that because, oh my gosh, here's a mammal with a bendy spine, and I can learn something by looking at this and studying it. It's going to be great. So just remember that there are these inflection points. Actually, here you can see some of those ribs.
Oh.
That's the scapula up in here.
Yeah, or you could have a spinous process that's sticking out.
Ah, yep, you're right. Spinous process is in
Yeah.
here. I see some up to this point.
Pinch its little cheek.
All right, so in drawing squirrels, I'm not going to do a step-by-step on how to build the drawing, but I want to use squirrels as an example of thinking about fur texture. All right? Because all over the squirrel body, there is short hair here and long hair back here. And so it's a good chance to kind of contrast both of these. I'm going to draw this furry squirrel, and I'm going to draw a few hairs in on the tail. Most of it's going to be a suggestion of hair. But what you don't want to do, here's the spoiler alert, is don't cover it with hair. What you're going to try to do is to draw the pelt. Try to draw this massive fur overlaying something with structure and reveal that underlying structure by how you handle that detail. If you just get like a technique for drawing fur detail, then what happens is you get this stuff, this stuff that looks like, that's good fur texture, but it kind of looks like a feather duster or a dust bunny, right? Rather than that underlying structure. So we're going to try to reveal that structure underneath. So the first thing I did is to paint in with Shadow Violet from Daniel Smith, a little bit of shadow on the underside of this squirrel, leaving the upper parts lit. Squirrels also have this white fringe of hair around, the western gray squirrel does, around the tail, so I am leaving a little bit of that whiteness there. If this were this was to make a drawing for a field guide, and so I should have put shadow on its belly, but I wanted to show that it has this nice white belly, and so I kind of cheated here and left its belly very white so that I could have a line to it going white belly. Once this is dry, I mixed up some black tourmaline genuine, another Daniel Smith color, and it's this nice sort of neutral gray color, and I painted that over the squirrel, leaving that little white halo. And you see how the shadow pops through. And then, does anybody have a water brush?
Yes.
Could I borrow your water brush? So the Pentel large water brush is my brush of choice. Does anybody have the Pentel one? See, so the Pentel. I'm going to introduce you to a new water brush, which I think is here we go. And is it the large? It's the large. Okay, this is this brush. Mm-hmm. All right, hey, I don't have stock in Pentel, but this brush, this is the brush. All right, you want the one with the large tip. It snaps to a nice fine point. It's got the water inside the handle. It's got a good cap that doesn't come off in your backpack. Listen to this. All right, click, snaps closed. You hear that? You are good. And you can do all your little fine lines with this nice sharp tip. But here's the crazy thing. I'm going to first do this for the folks on the camera here. You can, I hope my hand is in focus here and we're in the screen, are we?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. So what I do is I fan the tip out.
Up a little bit.
Up a little bit?
Yeah, perfect, yeah.
So I fan this tip out with my fingers and it makes this multi-tipped, jaggedy chisel effect. So I dip it in a little bit of fairly dry paint. I don't want a drop of water on it, a big globby drop of water, and then I fan it out like that. And what I can do is, with a few strokes then, it makes this fur texture. So play with that, and let me bring this around. So I take this, and I fan it with my fingers. All right? So I just take this thing, and I go, whoop. It doesn't mess up the brush. If I just roll that on my hand, it's sharp again. So here, I just go, bijou. Just. Thank you. So love that brush. The secret here is don't do it everywhere. Leave some places without that texture. So I've got some of that texture in here, got some of that texture up in here, a little bit down in here. But leave some places without that. That will then be kind of an emphasis point where there's a little, I wanted to draw people's attention to the end of the fluffy tail and a little bit into the body here. I let that dry, and then I got a white gel pen and a white colored pencil. So a Faber-Castell Polychromos white pencil. I really am loving those kinds of pencils. First we'll take a look at the tail here. I put some little hair marks into the tail with this white pen. And on the body, look at the body here. Without, I'm sort of drawing in the sheen with a jaggedy mark.
Oops, not you.
Oh,
So it's a subtle thing on the body, pretty in your face here. But here's what I'm not doing on the tail. So don't do this. Don't go, my brain knows that I've got a tail like this. There's some little bone and skin tail coming here. And so people tend to do is do this. And this kind of looks like a feather. We don't want that feather effect, because what's going on is some hairs are actually pointing up towards you. So what are you going to do about that? So instead, let's say this is your tail. Start with, in the middle, a few little dots and lines. So a few little dots and little lines. There's a few little lines and little dots through this part here. Those are the hairs that are pointing up towards you. Then I'm going to go one zone out from those, and I'm going to put in a few shorter lines, being consistently inconsistent. This one's out at an angle. And then, finally, longer ones outside of that. And those together give you this effect of angled hairs from different angles. The squirrel also has a zone of darker hair. So on an individual hair, the tip of it's white, and there's a dark zone behind that. When you look at squirrel tails from some angles, you'll see these bands of whites and darks in them. And so I put the dark band in below the white, just with a sharp colored pencil, a little black colored pencil. So I just and did in some of these areas that dark zone. Those together with that white in the middle, that gray, gives you that effect of a fluffy tail. On the body here, I'm not drawing hair, hair, hair. I'm trying to suggest the cracks in the fur between clumps of hair. And that gives you a feeling of short hair versus fluffy. There are a few other things that I tried to figure out how to get those into previous workshops, but it just didn't kind of work with the flow. So just I've got a little grab bag of a few more things, a few kind of, here are my odd anatomical ends and odds. And then it looks like we'll have time for the gaits. And we'll take a look at the ways that animals move their legs. And that'll be fun. So the first thing to think about is the effect of gravity on an animal with this bent leg. So we've got this heel off the ground, and we want to think about what is the impact of gravity on that. So we have, if you've got these legs, again, here's your heel off the ground, so toes, heel, this is the knee, and it's got a hip up in here. So the leg is really bent. If this animal were to weigh more, if you're to take this and increase its size so it's heavier, this arrangement would put a lot of strain on its muscles. If anybody is in a karate class or something, had to sit in horse stance with your legs bent, your calves start burning because our trunks are heavy. And then there's some light person in the class, a tiny little twig of a person, who's in their horse stance, who's like, yeah, this is great, I can do this all day, right? Because they don't have as much mass, right? The bigger you are, the more you weigh, the more this becomes difficult to do. So if you take, let's say you're out drawing a bunch of gazelles, and an eland shows up, all right, you probably have a tendency to put too much zigzag in its leg. Because look, this is a heavy critter, and the leg is straighter.
right? But if you have this model in your head that heavy critters, straight legs, like for instance, if you're drawing a lot of horses, you've got experience drawing horses, and then you go to draw a gazelle, you'll draw its leg too straight. Because your model that you're working off of is this heavy horse, very straight legged. Now here's an elephant. Oh, columns, right? So the heavier you are, the more you have to straighten yourself up to the gravoportal posture, where you're just stacking your weight on top of these limbs. You don't want to have it in this little crouch. So that's just sort of a general principle that applies across all the mammals. The smaller the body, the more you're going to see bendy. Bendy is nice because this little, it gives you this little dick is incredible. It's like, it's got a lot of spring, right? But this, if you took a growing machine and you doubled the size of this, it wouldn't be able to walk very well. Triple the size, its legs might break under its own weight. Another thing that I want to point out is a few muscle masses that are going to make prominent bulges on our bodies. And you don't have to memorize them all, but here there are a few really, really big ones. And the first, we're going to look up here on the front of the body here, we're going to take a look at the triceps. Now, human weightlifters, they have these weightlifting shows and where they stand up in front of the audience and the judges are sitting there and they want to have big biceps because that impresses people. Right? Look at my guns. I'm tough, right? So this is good for impressing judges. But the tricep, the muscle back here that's responsible for pushing and pushing up off the ground, that's actually a much more functional muscle. So if somebody is doing PT and recovering from a stroke or something and trying to get more muscle, the therapist isn't there with them going like, come on, show me those guns, pump it, right? No, they're working that tricep because this is this really functional muscle. So elders who are doing strength training, they'll do a lot of tricep work because that's a really, really useful muscle. And the most that this pronghorn is ever going to have to curl is the weight of its unweighted leg, right? But it's pushing off all the time. So the tricep, which is, so there's a shoulder blade in here, there is a upper arm bone here, right? The humerus is in here, and the tricep is this mass between them. All right, so the tricep is this big bulge above the leg, right? And so from the elbow, above that, that's where the triceps sits.
And that muscle is helping them do what?
That is pushing this way, right? So
it's a
if I put my foot on the ground and I straighten that leg, if you're doing a push-up, you're really feeling a lot of it here. And so that's, for what these guys do, a very functional thing. Here is the lioness, and she has this big bump right here. This is this big mass of tricep that she has hanging on the back of her arm. You look around at a bunch of critters, you're going to see this big ball right up here. Here's the shoulder blade coming down, and at the base of that, this ball comes off of it. That's where the tricep is. So we expect to see in the forearm that big mass. On the back leg, a really prominent muscle is the biceps femoris. And it is this sheath of muscle that runs across the leg from the point of the hip up here to between the kneecap and the tibia down here. So it's this thing that comes across like that. And on the back side of it, it makes this groove right here. This very prominent groove on the back side of the muscle between the semi-tendinous muscle and the biceps femoris. So look for this groove on the back of your beastie. See that?
Nice tricep here, and here's this groove. Another feature of the back leg,
What was
That-
that one called, Jeff?
so the bicep femoris runs across here, and it's the back side of that. Here, it's shaggier hair, hard to see it. But this little diptych does show us one other feature of the back leg that is really, really cool. And what that is that so it's tibia, fibula, it's a bone that runs right in here. And then it has its metatarsal bones down here. And sticking up here, it has its heel bone. And so, one bone coming down here, heel coming up here. Attached to the back of this heel bone is an Achilles tendon that runs up to the calf muscle up here. And so on one side, I have bone, bone, and a very strong tendon. And what that makes is a little triangle right back here on the foot. So I'm going to erase this, look for the triangle. See the triangle right in here? Right here. So right there, this is going to really help you kind of get this sense of, it's a very prominent sort of structural mark on your critter. You look for that, you're going to see it in critter after critter after critter. One last muscle for you is the one that turns the head side to side. So on a human being, I have this rope of muscle right here that goes from the back of my ear and it comes down to the front of my collarbone here. And as I turn my head here, you can see that as this little ropey thing here. You turn your head to the side and you'll feel it right there on your own neck. Now, this topi doesn't have a collarbone. So it's not coming down there. This, sort of the equivalent muscle, is coming down from the back of the ear there, and it's going to go into a sheath above the shoulder above its shoulder. And that makes this prominent groove right down here from the back of the ear down that way. Look on that on critter heads, and it takes the neck from being this sort of just this blob to having some real structure in it. If the animal takes its head and lowers it, the head is now in a different position relative to the shoulder. And notice how this muscle now kind of goes along the side of the neck more, instead of coming down at an angle like that.
And that's analogous to RSCM, but there's no C because there's no clavicle.
Yes.
Okay.
And it attaches at the humerus, at the,
It attaches, there's muscles on the humerus and it goes in a sheath above the shoulder. Yeah, above the humerus. And so those are just a few muscles. I suggest we have those in our pocket. One last thing to notice about muscles is that the power comes from the back legs. This muscle mass is going to be big. The job of the front legs is different. So this is a big muscle mass attached to a spring. This is a smaller muscle mass attached to a post. The job of the back legs is to push forward. The job of the front legs is to, when the back legs push forward, your head doesn't smack into the ground. Okay? So, smaller muscle mass, larger muscle mass. And that segues us to the gaits. Right? it's useful to think about the positions that you see animals' legs in. And think about that ahead of them, of when you're out there sketching them. That way, if the legs are moving around a little bit, it's easier for you to kind of see what's happening. So it's good to have a Gates foundation. So let's just check out what the horse's legs do as it walks.
What fun.
Isn't that fun? There's a whole wonderful subculture of people out there drawing on horses. And it's fascinating to watch. They're putting up all these great, just do a YouTube search for, horse walking. And these people are just doing fantastic stuff. But let's just look at what's out going on here. And notice that the front leg comes down, and it's going to stay there planted on the ground until the back leg comes up and wants to land in that same spot, and pops it out of the way. All right, so here it is, back leg comes up, excuse me, that's my spot. Back leg comes up, my spot, right? And the opposite is happening on the other side. So when the side close to you is close together, the back side is apart. When the close side is apart, the back side is close together. So back side close together. Front side close together, back side close together. Right? If you forget what's going on here, just get down on all fours and crawl, and you will do exactly the same thing. That as your knee comes forward, your hand comes up and takes the next spot. So a standing position, you just look at the critter. A walking position, its legs are moving slow enough that we can see what's happening, and we have in our own bodies an easy model that helps us kind of remember that. And it's this very symmetrical thing where like you got two together, two apart. I can do that. Right. Now let's take a look at the gallop.
Oh boy.
You ready? So look carefully at the leg positions of these horses.
Both horses are a fraction under the track record as they reach the milestone, and
They're about to come on your side.
it's the
Here we go.
Emperor's
Look at the leg positions.
and he fails. Seabiscuit is going away, increasing his lead with every stride. With 40,000 frenzied
Legs,
people
legs.
cheering him on, the great son of hardtack pounds down to the finish line in the upset of the year. He gets across the finish with a new track record. The grandest horse in 40 years of racing had won his greatest victory.
Who can name the horse?
Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit. Seabiscuit just beat War Admiral. Yeah. All right. So, what were the legs doing?
They were a blur.
They were a blur. Did anybody see any pattern in the blur?
Yeah, you can, it's that traditional, horse with flying legs, right?
Yep.
They go front, and then they go together, and then front, and they go together. And so the back ones meet the front ones,
All right. So the back ones meet the front ones and a little gathered,
and then they're all out.
and then they're all out. All right. So that.
But on the front, they're offset.
So they're offset.
Offset.
Okay, a little bit offset, but you're seeing kind of out and back with some offset. Okay, so that's what I saw too. All right, so here's the interesting thing. It's not doing that. This is weird. This is weird. So there's in the 1800s, there was a famous horse painter named Stubbs, George Stubbs, and he did things like, he was so into horses that he rented an apartment and brought the carcass of a horse in it and dangled it from the ceiling, right, by ropes, and flayed this dead horse one muscle at a time and did a series of anatomical drawings from every angle at these different stages. Can you imagine having a tenant like this? Right? I mean, that's commitment. And really getting into these. This would take a while. This place, I mean, that's commitment to horse anatomy. But he understood these horses inside and out. He really got down to the bones of what was going on with these horses. And then he would draw them, he would paint them for the aristocracy and things, and he'd give them their painting of the horse. And look at this little position here, that's familiar to us, right? We've seen that. Okay, we can do that. And then we have, this is what we also saw in that video, right? And here he goes again. So he would also go out he would have somebody gallop a horse across the field. And this guy was more committed than we ever will be to getting these positions right. And he would look at it, and this is what he did. Right, there's that offset, there's the front and the back.
And that was as much as he could see at that speed.
Exactly.
That's,
And what's going on is if I wave my hand here, you see a hand ghost at the top and the bottom at the same time.
mhm.
Because it's slowing down slightly here and slowing down slightly here to change direction,
So that's
right? And that gives you those two ghost images. So you see those things at the same time. We don't have vision that refreshes fast enough for us to pick up. Now, if you're doing this to a dragonfly, the dragonfly would be going, yeah, it's up there. Yeah, it's down there. Yep, it's up there. Try to catch a dragonfly with a butterfly net, and they're like, right? They can see motion. We can't see that motion. We just, for our survival, we just got to be able to, it's coming fast, I'm gonna run.
Snapshot.
Yeah. So there's this rocking horse position. There's no point in their gait that they do that. And nobody knew this until this guy came along. So this is Edward Muybridge. And in the 1800s, end of the 1800s, after he kind of cleared up that little thing about, the murder, he took on the scientific study of motion. And he would set up these arrays of cameras and have a horse run down and click, 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 get a photograph taken. And what he discovered is that there's no place in that sequence that the horse ever takes the rocking chair position. Isn't that crazy? So when the feet are all the way up, the back feet are all the way up, the front feet are on the ground. And when the front feet are all the way extended, notice as you observe they're not symmetrical, right? The back feet are on the ground. And so you look at a horse running, you can have front feet on the ground, back feet, front feet, back feet, right? But there's no rocking horse position. There is a point where they're all gathered in the air, boom, there, right? Gathered suspension there, right? But when that's a card. Oh, there's a horse, great. So here we go, gathered suspension, and back feet coming down, watch the back feet go, ba, boom, front legs extended, then back legs when the fronts are on the ground. But to our eyes, it's a blur, and we can't see that. So what are you going to do about this? There's several ways of handling it. One is to get all the track on it, and you draw the horse body coming towards you, or galloping along, and the feet underneath are a blur. You just draw what you see. There's no shame in drawing what you see. As a matter of fact, a great noble tradition. A lot of things happen, good things happen when you draw what you see. So if it's like when people draw hummingbird wings and they draw it like, right? So that is a drawing of a high-speed photograph, not a drawing of something that you perceive, right? So if you want to draw a drawing of a high-speed photograph of a bird, that's different than drawing the bird, right? So one thing that you can do is to draw the blur under it. Another thing that you can do is to make a little cheat sheet of Muybridge photographs, or I'm going to make a little cheat sheet and post it on my website along with this video of, you want to have a bunch of little running positions? Great. Here are running positions, here are walking positions of a bunch of different types of critters. And you can then take one of those and kind of like, oh, yeah, that's a position, like back feet, and then the front feet, and like, okay, I can do that. But don't feel bad because you can't look out there and get the feet in the right position. And if you want to, what some people will do is they will also memorize just a few of these positions. Like, oh yeah, okay, I can have these ones wide, and then these ones on the ground, and that one just up a little bit more. Okay, you can do that too. But don't feel bad if you're not able to, as the thing's going on, like you can't follow those legs, right? It's because you're a human being, and our vision isn't that good. So this is what you see with these critters. There's one other exception to this, and that is runners with a very flexible spine and very long legs, ones that really go fast. The greyhounds, the cheetahs, there's a different thing that goes on with them. So horses, they've got a gathered suspension, and then, as we saw, the feet are doing, so when they're fully extended, it's a different thing. The cheetahs, on the other hand, and look at the spine position. So changes in hips and the shoulder blades, but look at this guy. All right. So the cheetah and the greyhound actually have a full gathered suspension and an extended suspension. So as they're running along, here's a greyhound going, wah, 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 wah. You can do great things with forward and backward buttons. All right. Look at that spine. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Anybody work in the store?
No.
Oh, darn, the door's open, I have a bunch of stuff.
So the skeleton is so what we're seeing in the skeleton is sort of a reflection of what's going on under the hood there. Now, if you look at a cheetah run, again, it's a blur. Right? You sort of, what happens is you've got a head that's still and then just fog behind it because it's going so incredibly fast. So don't feel that we somehow are supposed to have some amazing vision that we don't. You can just draw what you see. And so I saw this one wonderful drawing of a cheetah running, and there was kind of a head out, there was a little bit of back and kind of a tail with a dark tip, and then some dust. Right? And that I think that's an accurate way of showing it. But still, seeing them in motion is an incredible thing. In the process of doing the research for this workshop, I came across a video that was made by National Geographic, and it was so exquisitely beautiful that I decided to share it with you. It's a short little film of a cheetah running, and they just slowed it down. And being able to see these mechanics, it brought me to tears. And I hope that you enjoy it. There's the gathered suspension, that curve in the back. Foot, push off, stretch. Look at that curve in the back
So
the
he
other way.
actually does assume the rocking horse
Yes,
position.
this one is rocking horse.
Yeah.
And then foot in the front, legs straight to catch that weight.
Look at the shoulder muscle mass.
Yeah. And then just look at this reach. Reach.
Oh, the lighting is perfect too.
This is so. I mean, this is the ultimate running machine here. It's just look at the head. Just
So tracks.
Never moves.
It just tracks the whole
stunning.
So I've been looking at the paws, and they go right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left. Front paw left,
Left, right.
Yeah.
right. Back paws.
Yeah. So it's a rotary gallop, which means that the footfalls go around in a circle.
Yeah.
There's a different way. There's also a cross gallop, so they can do a roto gallop or a cross gallop. And look at when the front foot comes down. Look at what happens with the shoulder blade when the weight of the body comes onto the shoulder.
Push that.
It's interesting how the head stays completely level and the pelvis is going way up and down, just
Yeah.
really moving.
That's great.
Amazing, absolutely stunning.
And there's, oh,
I like watching them.
Just, it's absolutely beautiful. Part of the reason that I do nature journaling is that, I'm gonna quiet this a little bit. Part of the reason that I do nature journaling is because it helps me pay attention to the world. And there is so much wonder and grace and beauty in this world if we can give ourselves permission to stop and to pay attention a little bit more. It doesn't have to be a cheetah, it can be in the most common flower outside your door. If we can get ourselves to look at that in a way which we haven't seen it before, another level of beauty in this precious world. Look, becomes accessible to us. And it's my hope that through the attention which we give the world, that not only are our lives enriched by this process of journaling, but we're also more motivated to become stewards to protect it. This is an endangered species. There are strong economic forces that would wipe this off the planet. And if we're not making conscious decisions about these and other creatures, even creatures close to our home and wild places, things are going to happen because of the march of the power of economic forces. And it's my hope that through our intentional act of attention, that our love for this world motivates us to be better stewards. And I hope you'll join me in that. So thank you for joining me for the workshop, and I hope you got some useful tools. And I'll see you all this weekend, I hope, for our field trip to the Oakland Zoo. Thank you.